Life in Tech. I'm Jason.
And I'm TK.
And we're Danless yet again.
I know, but actually we can't goof on Dan. We can't goof on Dan this week. I would be remiss in saying his stepdad died, and from everything that Dan said, he was a gracious and nice man. And so I want a little shout out to Dan this morning while their family's grieving.
Yeah, I agree, man. I don't know, especially the older I get, every time how do you say this? I'm not a fan of anybody dying,
No.
Especially just unnecessarily, let's say, right?
Well, it's like there's those people, people you don't love in the world, right? People, I wish they were dead. No, there's a big jump between I don't really like you and enjoy chatting with you and having dinner with you, and I wish you were dead.
Right. No. That's a huge leap that we ought to, as a society, be a lot more careful about making, I think.
Right. No doubt.
Yeah, so, I hope Dan's all right. I haven't talked to him.
I was texting back and forth with him yesterday, so I think he's in a pretty good place. But, yeah, shout out to Dan today.
I always kind of feel a little weird in situations like that. Like, do I email the guy? Do I text him? Do I wait for him? So, when he had those issues with his brother earlier this year, too.
Yep.
I just kind of sent him a message like this time. I'm here if you need me. You know that. So
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, especially like for folks like us that have been friends for a long time, you seem to find the right pentameter. And I think yesterday, Dan posted it on Twitter, and I'm not going to get out in the Twitterverse and everything like that. So I just, caught up with him on my own time. I think the problem is that you get people at work, that you're casual acquaintances with and stuff like that. How do you navigate that? I think that becomes a little bit more tricky.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, I'm a big believer in, reaching out and, being sorry for their loss because, I think as a human you should be, right?
Yeah, man. I mean, we're all kind of in this together. Ultimately, if you scale it the right way, we're all running the same race.
Right. I've probably been witness to as much death as anybody on earth, right? And it's still, when it's somebody or anything like that. But I always one of my pet peeves is, he died doing what he loved doing. Well, he was doing what he loved doing, and he happened to die, right? We hoped it wouldn't come to this type of thing, right?
Yeah.
But no, I just kids and people that walk off the street and get hit by a car when they're 30. Somebody passes away when they're in their 80s or 90s. I want to know how they lived that long, right? I want that type of life, right? Especially if they lived a good life. I mean, my father spent the last 10 or so years of his life battling emphysema, and he used to say it was like breathing through one of those little cocktail straws.
Oh yeah.
I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
No, man. No. I don't have to like people. I don't have to talk to people. But that doesn't mean I want them to do anything other than try to be the best version of themselves.
Right.
And look, man, maybe this roll the dice ain't it for them.
Exactly.
And maybe there's nothing I can do about it for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No.
I don't have a savior complex.
But I mean, when you think today, I mean, if somebody passed away 15, 20 years ago, even, not so in the distant past, right? I mean, 20 years ago, it took a bit for it to get around.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, now it's instantaneous. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that in everything in life, what social media has done in life is what PowerPoint did in business. It took away context. Right. And you need to there needs to be time to have context. Right. We used to say that one of the reasons the Afghan people and Taliban and all that were really going to be great at resisting and how they waited out the Russians effectively and how they're doing the same thing to us is they still blame Genghis Khan for their problems, right? They have context, right? I mean, he's been dead for more than an hour, right? I mean, I don't know how many hundreds of years. I mean, I do, but it's like he's been dead for quite a while, and we want to put bulletized list up, right? Now we want to put 140 characters up, right? And we want this to be instantaneous. And I think that in anything in life, you need to have some sort of considered internal reflection to make a great observation, right? I mean, I think it's no more evident than in public life and, in governments around the world, right? We design a system of government to have Congress fix your potholes and the Senate be delivered to the body, and now somebody's sticking a microphone in their face and typing on Twitter with every utterance, and we expect all these folks to be geniuses, and I think it's sometimes a bridge too far. And I think it trickles itself down into everyday life. It's, we expect to know the answers right away.
Yeah, right. And we really don't have much of a guide, as it were, to delineate between those times in which expedient bullet point information is actually vital to have versus nuanced conversation or comprehension.
Right. I think in the military, there's certain, and it's easy for me to go there because I have purposeful examples, right? If you're going to brief a really senior person, some general admiral, cabinet level post in the government, you can have some context because you can be deliberative about it, but you're still, because, hey, the brief's only an hour long, we got to get through all this stuff, and people start packing this stuff in, right? I think the time when you need bulleted lists and when you need to be deliberate is in times of emergency, right? Because in its process, right? And you can translate, I can translate it directly into tech, right? There's times where we have to think about what we're doing and we have to contemplate the vision of what we want. And then once we say, okay, this is the end state we want, we then have to start working the process to get there. So you have to, as an organization, it's why I think when people transition from being an operational leader, whether you're the CFO, the COO, and all those types of things, now you're the CEO. Hey, I used to have a bunch of folks, and I was really focused in and down on solving problems and going through my bulleted lists. And I might have to have some vision about leadership, about how to get all those people to do that. But largely, it's a process. And I don't care whether it's sales or, the tech side, the actual building and thing. But in the tech world, a few folks have to have the vision, right? And if you're the CEO and you don't have the vision, you better look around and find somebody else in that C-suite in a hurry that can articulate a game plan, or you don't belong there.
Right.
I mean, that's just, and you've got to grow into that, right? And but it's the same. I think it's the same across a lot of industries. And I'm not really conversant in, but that vision requires that depth and protracted discussion. And in the military, that equivalent of having to have a process is two things. One, when we need to come and protect people with calling for fire from airplanes, right? There's a brief and it's 9 lines. We call it a 9 line, right? There's a clothing company. It's called 9 Line, right? And it's some guy that got out and he started a clothing company. That, and when we go to medevac people,
sure,
right? And it's very deliberate and it's purposeful for two reasons. One, to get the person off the battlefield within that golden hour, and two, to protect the crew going in to go get that person, right? And I think the big transition of military medicine, right, that it takes us from all big advances in emergency medicine have happened in the military. Then they trickle their way down into the civilian world. And the Vietnam conflict really did a lot to go to the modern medicine, emergency medicine that we have now. And there's things now you're seeing that are in the back of ambulances across America that are a direct response to the now going on multi-decade conflict we've been fighting in Afghanistan. And I still don't think that any of those advances are worth the amount of time we spent there. But that concept that we have to be deliberative at certain times and ignore the nuance, right? I'm here to save your life. I mean, I don't know, probably 4 friends of mine that are all former SEALs that they're all doctors now. And actually, I probably have a few more, but they're extended people. I mean, I'm talking to people I know directly. And those 4 are all emergency medicine people, right? Because it's save your life, move on, right? It's very process oriented, right? They're not big hand holders, if it were, right? They're not they're not the bedside manner people. But there's a lot of people that don't and can't function in an emergency room or function in that situation, right? They want that interaction with another human. Right?
Well, and it's a different type of functional stress.
Yeah, no doubt. And move along, go. They joke around. They're like, "Hey, I'm here to save their life, so they can go talk with somebody that really cares." Right. But it's a really, that's one of those, dark humor. Like, I want you guys to go out to breakfast with a bunch of people that ride in ambulances, emergency medicine techs and paramedics, right? People will be like, man, that's very cold. Well, you weren't out all night while they were at traffic stops scraping people off the street from DUIs and everything like that.
Right.
Or from a social aspect, years ago, I went to paramedic school when I was in the Navy, and one of the things we had to do was we had to do ride-alongs to stay current. And we'd go to big cities. This is before 9/11, and we'd go to big cities because tragically, I mean, why we're there is to learn how to be trauma medics, right? I mean, that's, let's get down to the goal. And at the time, and still, Virginia Beach is one of the safest cities in America, right? When there's a murder or a death in Virginia Beach, it's like stop the news.
Yeah.
You go to New Orleans, you can't even get through all the homicides in a half an hour.
Right.
It's sad, right? I mean, that's just the state of some of the big cities in the U.S. And if it doesn't tear your heart up to get out of an ambulance and just go, we're nothing right now but a taxi service to the emergency room, right? And you get out and you look at a lady, and I mean, more than once, I'd look at a patient and go, I know this person looks like they're in their 50s or 60s, but I guarantee you we're going to get down to they're in their 40s.
Right.
Because they lack basic primary care. Right. And they're, I looked at this one lady and I'm like, man, what's your chief complaint? She's like, I hurt. And I'm like, where? And she's like, from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet, and
yeah.
The hard part is, like, I go down there for a couple of weeks and I get really empathetic and I kind of get grumpy about the situation and the totality of it all. Like, what are we going to do? But if you look at these medics, these poor guys, they're so desensitized and they have paperwork to fill out, and they're being, the system has them kind of sled dogging towards an answer, right? Mm-hmm. I think it was Miami. I think it was Miami. Guy would get out of the ambulance and it's not my turn to be the guy doing all this, right? We take turns what we're doing. And there's a gentleman sitting on the curb with a buck knife sticking out of his scapula. Like, I mean, literally big buck knife, like not like a little pen knife or something, like, what is that? Like the guy from Australia, the Crocodile Dundee knife, right?
Yeah. This is a knife.
Yeah, exactly. And these guys get out and they're like, name, thing, address, blah, blah, blah. And then they get to chief complaint. And I'm the only one that's actually looking at them because the other two are so engaged in getting their forms done, right? And I'm not blaming them. I'm telling you how the system has.
That's right.
What's the system required of them? And the guy just looked at me and I was like, I'm thinking it's a big knife sticking out of him. Let's start with that. That's an unusual occurrence, right? And those, when you look at stuff like that, I mean, that guy, he's sitting there quietly and patiently, but I mean, I didn't take an X-ray or anything, but I guarantee you, if you're sticking a knife down somebody like this, it couldn't have been any more than this far away from his lung.
Yeah, sure.
Something that's really going to bleed profusely internally, and he's going to die quickly, right? Mm-hmm. But that's, I think, when we start talking about when you have to have process and everything like that, my personal opinion is when you want nuance is when you have to talk about humanity. When you want process, it's when you have to ignore humanity to get a result. And usually you're not ignoring humanity to get a result. You're ignoring something temporarily to save another life.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Sure.
I mean, because that's like emergency medicine, I think is probably the best example because it's process 101, right? Because you've got time, you've got things you have to do, and you want people to be able to react in a certain way.
Well, right. Wouldn't you agree? I've often thought, like, take a PowerPoint, for instance, which I don't use a lot of just because it doesn't fit my style for let's say, teaching. That's the primary use of it, right? Yeah. I'm much better on like a whiteboard, blackboard surface. But in those times where I have a PowerPoint, I look at it as not a way to, in bullet point seriation, define what I want to talk about. It's more of, look at this and don't think about anything else. And that's what I think when I hear you describe it that way, right? If we want nuance, we have to have a conversation so we can discover that and play with it and work it back and forth. If you want process, what you want is only this and nothing else. And so to me, it's more of a filtering system than it is a definition system.
Right. But think about how many companies are right now that they do nothing but come up with thousands of preset slides to try to create that. Right. Yeah. The military, we want to jam as many bullets onto one page as we can, right? For a bunch of really bad reasons, I think. This is my personal opinion, right? But when you want, like you said, when you want nuance, it's get one thought out. For me, teaching, when I was teaching, we left the PowerPoints at home, right? Because largely, if you're doing something, again, it's real process oriented. Like I'm teaching somebody how to use a radio, and the buttonology is the same, and everything's the same every week. I think that having pictures of that radio while their students are working on it is fine. But when we started teaching when I was at Blackbird, and we started teaching basic, literacy of technology, and we started. I got something going on crazy here. My Siri decided on my iPad I just wanted to start working out of the box. Who knows what it's going to think when I'm running my Yap? But we did everything on the board. We put a computer in front of every student, and one of the students every day we just had them plug in, and they were the person that was up on the monitor, and we were all working along together.
Right.
Right. Folks used to tell us that's really hard to orchestrate. You're never going to do it. But here's really where it worked: is I could have taken an engineer, right? I could have taken Jason Cooper and put him in front of the class, and he's a great teacher, but he's a high functioning electrical engineer that's really smart. Mm-hmm. And so what we said is like, hey, let's all figure out how to teach this. In a very small group of a couple of dudes, and when we were in front of folks, it was, hey, we used to have your job. If we can learn this, you can learn this. And more importantly, we were drawing it out on the board, right? And somebody said, and even now, like when I talk to people and they're like, hey, we're doing this, we want this, how about this? I'm like, all right, here's a marker, draw it up on the board. Because if you invented it, if it's your thing, if you're trying to raise money for it, you better be able to draw it like that. And that's how, and I've been told like a lot, that was one of our biggest things when we started getting feedback, was we like the fact the guys are drawing this out on the board because it says they know it. Mm-hmm. And I think what happens is PowerPoint, we call it the PowerPoint wheelchair. You get in there and you're really dependent on it. You can't function without that big crutch, and it becomes a placeholder, right? I mean, how many times have you been listening or watching somebody do something, there's a PowerPoint, and they have to look periodically to see where they're at?
Way too many, man. In
right?
my opinion.
I mean, the military is funny because I love doing this now, but I love doing it to people that were indoctrinated into this system of slideology. The person will get up there and they'll talk, and they should know when the next slide is, and they'll be talking, they'll go next slide, and then they'll just go, and then it'll be next slide. And it becomes this almost like authoritarian marching order. They're like,
sure,
but they're not looking back there because they know what they're talking about.
Right.
But
right.
My personal style is more like yours, where I want to draw it out on the board. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. Because then we're having a conversation, because you can draw part of it and then go, hey, what's next? And that little ad, all the transitions in PowerPoint, they make my head explode.
Well, the problem, and this is why I got away from PowerPoint, is it was just too confining. I would end up drawing all over my slides anyway.
Right.
And so I finally sat back and thought, well, why do I want to take the time to create them if I'm just going to essentially overrule them in the moment more often than not?
Right.
And it's too confining. For me, this is where I really like the iPad Pro with the new pencil. Because like with Sketchbook, I can just draw like it's a whiteboard and I project it all around the room.
Right.
And the nice thing about it is rather than asking questions and waiting for somebody to give me an answer and then I write it, what I really like now is just saying, look, here's the iPad and the pencil. You take it. You write what you think is next.
It's the 21st century version of the student walking up to the board.
Exactly.
Right. That's perfect.
Right. But the nice thing is nobody has to be physically disturbed, which is, has its own set of embarrassments and awkwardness. You know what I mean?
Right. But here's the thing. I think that one of those things, like I think that's part of the education experience. And I'm not saying it always manifests itself positively, mm-hmm. but I think there's something for making somebody get up in front of the class.
Sure. Right.
Because there's a lot of hurdles internally people have to overcome of themselves. Right. That college is a little bit different, because there's a certain minimum standard you expect everyone to have. Maybe not in a 101 class, but certainly as you move into the 300, 400 classes, people are getting closer to graduation. You expect a certain base of knowledge. But think about like in high school and, things that the social awkwardness that people try to overcome. And I think it was much harder, certainly in the late 70s and early 80s when I went to high school, because we were a lot less concerned about people's feelings then than we are now. And what a great time to be able to, in the moment, have a conversation if that kind of relationship between those that are sitting in there and those things. Because what do I want? I want somebody to come up and be encouraged to share. And ultimately, I want everybody that's sitting in there to be a partner in that success and be encouraging. Right? That's teamwork. Mm-hmm. Right? And if we're not doing that, how I want to get a hold of that behavior at 15. I don't want to wait until they're at, ABC company and we're all around the table trying to come up with a good idea, and somebody's like, "That's stupid," right? Because I go well, you've seen I go apoplectic when people talk to other people like that when we're trying to come up with a great idea, right?
Yeah, right.
Might not be the idea of choice, but it's certainly not stupid, right?
Well, and calling it stupid isn't particularly helpful. Like,
well, it's not only not helpful, it's completely distracting, right?
yeah,
I think, I don't know, Dan was there. I don't think you were. We did an offsite at one of the companies we were at, and it was to say, here's where we're at. Let's imagine where we want to be, right? We don't have a whole bunch of time to get there, but we're on a path and we largely know where we're at. But let's think about it differently and try to come up with some different ways to get there that don't feel so painful, right? That was the whole purpose of this thing. First person gets up. The CEO's like, "Hey, what do you think?" He starts truly giving his emotions and feelings about what he thinks is wrong, and he gets yelled at. Second guy stands up, same thing. I call a timeout.
Yeah.
Right? And board members were there. I mean, it was priceless, right? And I don't mean it in a good way.
No, I get it.
I walk outside and I go, "Hey, you can keep yelling at people. We're about one person away from everybody telling you what you want to hear, not what we need to hear."
Right.
Right. It's that concept, right? And that's a hard thing, because especially you get into a room where there's all senior people, right? It's all directors, VPs, and C-level folks. Everybody's, a burgeoning, if they're not already, a burgeoning alpha personality that wants their way. Right. And that's very hard to do, right? Is to keep those wheels in the cart. But I think that kind of stuff all starts with, hey, what's the group dynamic? Like, how do I get into that, right? How do we respect the fact that it's the Breakfast Club model, right?
Yeah.
You've got a jock, you've got a nerd, you've got a stoner, you've got a basket case, you've got a prom queen, right? That's life, right?
Sure it is.
I went to high school football last night. My daughter's school had homecoming, and I mean, they make a big deal about it. They make an extremely big deal about it, and but you got to see everybody, right? The band kids were there, and the football players are there. You got the prom queen, you got the the peripheral kids. They've got all the clubs out there. So it was a big celebration of everything the school could be, and
exactly.
And it's also ends up being senior night for the. So what I really like, and we didn't do this when I was in high school. In fact, we did the opposite of this. We did bring all the football players out with their parents and talk about it, but then it was it. Well, then they took all the senior band members, right? People that are active participants in the game, whether it's on the field or the peripheral of being part of that experience, right? And I thought that was really good, And when Jared was there, there was something going on at one of the big public high schools, and a lot of the kids were like, "Hey, we can just hide. We can be anonymous," right? Which I don't think is good. I went to a huge public high school. I graduated with tons of kids. To the point where people, if on Facebook, "Hey, how you doing?" I'm like, "I have no idea who this is." I got to go look at their profile and go, "Oh, I went to high school with you." And I feel badly about that, because I don't know what that says about me at the time, but I'm just like, I just didn't know everybody, right?
Yeah, sure.
But I said, we were talking about this problem. It was, I don't know, it was, miscreant behavior that kids have that just get out of hand. It was one of the big public high schools. And he's like, "Dad, we don't have any of that." And I go, "Why not?" He goes, "I only got 90 kids in the class. We all know each other. We got to figure it out." Right. Yeah. That's the day I was like, I don't care what happens in my life. If it goes completely off the rails, I'm going to find the money to make sure that he has that experience. And it's the same experience that I want my daughter have. And it's, I don't believe all private schools are good and all public schools are bad. Right. I think as a parent, you got to be on the ball and you got to pick what's right for your kids. Right. And we have a lot of parents that have kids at Catholic that they've got 3 or 4 kids, and 2 of them went to Catholic, 1 of them went to public high school, and 1 of them went to the other private high schools, right? And it's finding the right fit, right, the right social dynamic and educational fit for your child, right? But it is funny to see that you don't see a lot of craziness going on at all these big events, because there's only 400 kids in the school total, from freshman to senior, and it's very, it's very welcoming. I mean, I think my daughter's somewhat of an oddity because she's played basketball there since she was a 7th grader. And so, and she had an older brother there. And so but I mean, she's got like multiple girls that are in college now that are like her big sisters, right? They chat all the time. They talk all the time because the school welcomes that dynamic. I mean, when you were a freshman in high school, how many seniors did you know? And how many of them were like, like she got a new dress or something. She'd send it to one of those girls just to say, hey, is this thing? And the girl's like, hey, when did you grow up? Go put back on little kids' clothes, right?
Yeah.
They've known her since she was 12 years old, right? And I think that you've got that whole dynamic is what we're trying to get when people go out in the workforce.
Yes, I would agree.
And you're a big part of this because you're taking them from that transitioning. You're that intermediate step between mom and dad and on my own at the workforce, left to my own devices to be good or bad.
Yeah. Well, that's why, like, one of the things I really like, at least about our department at High Point, and most of the other departments and schools I've gone to visit over the last 2 months are like this too. They're not set up like traditional classrooms. They're much more of like an open pod type setup,
right?
Where there's even like the hardcore science labs are this way, where there's like lab space around the periphery, right? Your traditional like lab bench, but where you interact with your peers and faculty, they're just different. Well, actually, because you can roll them around and reconfigure them, little pods.
Oh yeah.
And the nice thing too is they're all stand sit. So,
right.
Yeah, like even like the lectern is not a lectern; it's a stand up desk.
And you know how I feel about that. I mean, that's bringing that to Sound Circle there and getting everybody standing. I thought it was probably one of the better things I did while I was there, just from a basic health perspective. I think
it helps with a lot of different ideas too.
Right. Let me ask you a question about this.
Sure.
So here's my theory. Next time I'm working a job where we have conference rooms, I'm getting all stand-up conference tables, and we're going to stand. Right? I think it also leads. I think what it does one thing. One, I believe standing is better health and people moving around. Even if you're just moving on your feet, it's better for your body. It's better for your brain and everything else. And I truly believe that. This is probably like the only thing I sit down for a week because it's easier to be static, right? But this concept of doing it in conference rooms, there's a health benefit, but I think it leads to less bloviating because most people are like, okay, I'm done standing. I want to get out of here. And we keep people on task. When we were outside in Circle, before I moved into the bigger office, I'd get people in my office. I had no chairs. I didn't have a chair for me, and I'm not having one for anybody else. And we come in and I had the whole wall was whiteboard paint over the top of it.
Right.
And we get there, and what I would say is, hey, do an hour meeting at 35 minutes. We've got it across because we're not wasting time because people want to go sit down. They want to do something else, right? But I also found and this is strictly observational, I felt I was getting better ideas more quickly. Right?
I totally agree.
People out there thinking, it's that I'm on my feet, I'm moving, I want to do something. I don't know whether that's empirically true or not, but I think like a university is probably the best place to kind of test that out. I think that would be a very cool. I don't know how you would quantify that experiment, but it would have to be over multiple semesters, right? Because you've got all this. I think you've got historical reference of what grades were and what student impact was on their grades with them all sitting down. What's it like when they're all standing?
Well, and you could do it for faculty too, because we have all the student and departmental evals. Right. So every class, every student fills out an eval for faculty.
That's awesome.
And High Point's like really diligent about this. And then you also have your own. As far as I can tell, at least in my school, they don't do peer feedback like you'd be used to, but at least your chair and your dean sit down with you once a year because you have to publish your own performance plan, and then they evaluate your performance the prior year against that plan, and that's done every year.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, dude, that's life skill 101.
Fuck yeah, it is, man.
You know what I mean? That's awesome, man. I got to go out and I'm gonna have to start shouting you guys out in public now for that alone, right?
Well, I can understand why some personalities might shrink away from it, but man, listen, I'm a human being and I like being patted on the back when I do a good job. Of course it feels good. But what I really want to know is when I'm not doing as well as I could.
Right.
That's what I really am interested in.
Yep.
Let's go have a beer and you can pat me in the back and I'll pat you in the back and we'll hug and life's great. But man, if you think I'm not doing well or whatever, right? That's what I really want to know.
But I think the hard time people have with like what we would call like a 360 review.
Yeah,
right? You take a holistic view of where you're at. Is everybody's very good at telling people when they do well, right? How do you talk in a positive manner about things that didn't go so well, right? And that's another skill, right? And I don't care whether it's the Blue Angels, Thunderbird, military organizations are very good at this. And I think this is the one thing that stops people from being, stops this process from really working well, is there has to be an up and down, right? You have to be able to criticize up and manage up, and you have to be able to do it. So you have to leave ego at the door, right? And that's a big, hard thing, right? I think more and more when you read and if you're out in the world, like that's the big destructor, is the ego of it all, right? It stops people from giving truth to power, right?
Yeah.
In all walks of life, right? Whether it's a small organization or up to running as a sovereign nation, right? How well are we allowed? How easy is it for us to speak truth to power, right? That doesn't mean you're disrespectful, but it means you can disagree. Right. And if that's in place, it's a lot easier for me to come in and say, hey, I really liked what you did here, but here we have to pick up the pace. And I'm not talking about somebody that's just terrible. I'm like, you're trying to optimize performance. And so there's a discussion about, and I do think I somewhat buy into the concept of start off with good. Let's talk about what's so good, and then leave it back on a high note. All right.
Sure.
When you talk about sales, like you go into like software sales, it should be really easy to do that, right? Because you agreed on a comp plan, you agreed on a number, you made a commit, you either made it or you didn't. Right? But even that becomes squirrely because people want to digress into excuses. Well, this guy wouldn't sign it. We thought this was going to happen. And sometimes those are valid excuses, right? But for the most part, they're excuses, right? And everything, this is TK's opinion of the world. Most everything in life goes wrong, or you make mistakes because you couldn't imagine an outcome that would lead to that mistake, right? And imagination, right, on both sides, right? Einstein said, that imagination is the key, not knowledge, right? Because everything we've done great in the world has been because somebody had a huge amount of imagination backed up by a belief and a drive that allowed them not to quit along the way. Right? Edison said, I didn't fail 1,000 times. I just figured out, I just looked at 1,000 ways a light bulb would never work. Right?
Yeah.
On the positive side, people that are Imagineers, Walt Disney, how many times was that guy fired for not being able to draw and lacking imagination? Right?
It's crazy, right?
You always want to line those people up and just go, all right, man on the street, all right, tell us how'd you come to that conclusion there, Mr. Manager? But I would say that they weren't wrong at the time. There wasn't an outward expression of that imagination, that vision, that excitement and showing up and going, we're going to change the world, right? And so that's on the positive side. When we look at, largely adverse consequences, again, it's because we lack imagination, right? When you go out and do something that can lead to death, right? You're a race car driver, skier, military, however you want to determine it. Risk mitigation is all about creating the imagination that leads to saying, hey, this could really go wrong, right? This could really go badly. And what can we do to mitigate the risk down to an acceptable level? We're not going to put a bubble around everybody, but we have to get it so that a tragic outcome is tragic. It's not commonplace.
Right. It remains an exception.
It's on the scale of, hey, you didn't make your quota this month.
Right.
Okay. Well, why didn't you do that? Right. You didn't finish the project on time. Why didn't you do that? Right. And I think that if we start with imagination or lack thereof, depending on where we're at, and we focus on that imagination leading towards a directed outcome.
Yeah.
I think that's really where you start to get people that are engaged, because now you're giving them, there's childlike and childish. Yeah. And we joke Dan a lot because he sits on the fence. Right. And, all of us do at some point, right? We get incredibly childish, which is good, right? Because you get back and you can be silly and do stupid stuff and thing. But what we do is we take the childlike out of people. We take a sense of wonderment.
Yeah.
Right. And when you go to doing a peer review or anything like that, people get in their feels and they can't go, okay, you're right, I didn't really do that well. An after action report, when everybody sits down, regardless of rank, you effectively take it off in the military and you go, hey, that decision wasn't so good. Right. Or we could have done this better and everything else. And people leave their ego at the door. And that's hard. Right.
Sure it is.
It's a lot easier, I think, when you're 55 than it is when you're 35 and you're in the middle of it. Right. I can look back and go, wow, I probably should have not exhibited that behavior at the time. But I'm sitting around the room with 16 other dudes, 20 other dudes that are all exhibiting the same behavior, and you're defending your position.
Well, I think a big part of it too is at least in the West, this seems to be more of like a cultural thing in my estimation. The incentive is, well, we've talked about this like with politicians, right? The incentive is placed on being correct. And so when you're faced with the evidence that you're incorrect, that's hard because it's the opposite of the incentive gradient, right?
Right.
And, if we shift, even just subtly, that incentive to not being right or wrong in the moment, but when you're wrong, how do you adjust to it? What did you learn from it, and how can you propagate that learning? Right? It's just a subtle shift. I'm not saying people shouldn't be responsible. You should be responsible, but we should understand that part of taking responsibility inherently carries risk of failure.
Right. But I think that's the satisfaction of achievement in whatever venture you want to go to in life, is that I think there's a guy did a great little drawing, and it shows success, and it's the iceberg, right? And you just see the tip, and you're seeing, hey, the one underneath is all the struggles that they've had, right?
Yeah.
It's like the musician, that struggled for 10 or 15 years, playing little clubs, writing music in their garage, wanting to quit, right? And then, suddenly they get found, and then 3 weeks later they got in a record deal, and they're an overnight sensation.
Right.
Right. Even in the consulting world, people are like, I can't believe people want that. You're paying that guy that much money. Well, you're not paying a guy $5,000 for 2 days. You're paying him for the 20 years that he got to get there to where he can come in 2 days and articulate that experience to you.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is also why it's so important to set appropriate milestones.
Yes.
Right. I'm over the years, I've really worked hard to shift away from this idea of set a big goal and shoot for the sky. Fuck it. Right. More towards, let me set something that's reasonable and probably a little bit below that because of my own unreasonability.
Right.
And then, because what really matters is momentum and consistency.
You got a doctorate. You set a big, crazy goal. How many people are put all but dissertation on LinkedIn?
Oh, yeah. Well,
which
how many people put it there versus actually are? Yeah, sure.
You didn't get it,
Yeah, right. You stumbled at the finish line.
ABD means you got the tin medal or whatever it is. You didn't even get a silver medal, right?
No.
You're advertising that, hey, I spent all the time I had to spend there, but I couldn't push it across the finish line.
Right.
That's the hard part.
Right. Well, talking about racing, like where we started with this foot race, dude, I've never done a foot race in my life ever.
That's awesome. I'm so proud of you, man. You were diligent, and you basically busted it and did it, and that was it, and did a good time as well.
Yeah, well, and thank you, by the way. Thank you very much. I like seeing what I can do. I've said this before. The reason I picked up running is because I got tired of cycling inside in the winter, and I wanted to do something that sucks and I don't like, because my life ain't that bad, bro. Like, this is the perfect thing. Yeah. I went and got a coffee at Sheetz the other day, and I walked in, and this girl, I'd never met her before, young, says, "How you doing?" I said, "I'm doing excellent." And she's like, "Really? I've never heard anybody say that before." I'm like, "Well, I'm like excellent basically every day." And what she said
all the time? How you doing? I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Yeah. She said, "You must have the perfect life you always wanted." That's what she said to me. And I walked away and I'm like, son of a bitch, you're right. You're so
Actually, it's not that. I would walk away going, I got to write a book. Because it's not the perfect life you want. It's you're not allowing all of this other stuff to negatively influence you to the point of being paralyzed emotionally, intellectually, however you do that, right?
Well, you're keeping your eye on those milestones.
Right.
And that's like this running bit. Dude, I ain't that fast. I'm certainly not. That 7-mile race, the first place finisher ran it like in 40 minutes, which is a fast run, dude.
Yeah.
Fast. Okay.
I need a car to do it that fast.
Listen, man, I swear the person in front of me that I ended up beating because, anyway, man, long story short, I think there was some cheaters, but that's neither here nor there. Because, there was this girl that all of a sudden was in front of me, like at mile 6, and like she had perfect makeup on. I could smell the perfume because she was in front of me, and I'm like, dude, just dripping sweat because it's 90% humidity. You know what I mean? And I'm like, this doesn't seem right to me. There's something going on here. She's like stopping and taking selfies.
Nice.
I'm like, what the fuck is going on?
Years ago, what was her name? Rosie Ruiz. She was, it was the Boston Marathon, right? And at some point, she's like, well, wait a second. There's public transportation here. Why do I have to run all 26 miles? And just hops back into the crowd and goes. And it took a while for them to figure it out. Imagine that today with all the cameras that are out in public. I mean, you're not getting away with that. And it'll be
happened to my nephews. One of my nephews, they're 14, is running cross country, and he's running. My brother was telling me about this. These are my brother's kids, and this a couple weeks ago, I called my brother and he's like, "Hey, nephew A, like set a record for himself." I'm like, "Man, that's awesome," because now he and I are kind of bonding over running, right?
Right.
And I'm like, "So he got first place?" He's like, "No." Well, yes, but no. He thought he was going to get first place. He's all happy, gets the finish line, and there's a kid standing there with the medal on. And everybody's like, what the fuck?
Where did that kid come from?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you where he came from because he got caught by a drone. Somebody was flying a drone filming, right?
That's awesome. That is awesome.
This kid cut, because this is in Ohio, yeah?
Yeah.
Cut through the cornfield.
Nice. Nice. Good job, Scarecrow. Way to go.
Yeah, right?
That's awesome.
But anyway, what got me to where I was just, I'm going to do something that I don't like to do for the sake of saying, okay, my life's great, and I should do something that's a little difficult and see where I'm at in the world.
Right.
And then just showing up, every day on a schedule and putting the time in.
But that mentality right there is why you have a PhD or a doctorate in science, right? Is you showed up every day and you put the time in.
That's right. That's right.
You don't have to. Every day doesn't have to be good, but those are life skills, right? It's why I'm so big on kids in sports. Yep. Right? You don't have to be great. You don't have to do anything, but you got to show up to practice every day, and you got to be diligent about it, and you've got to learn to depend on other people when you're down, and then help other people when you're up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's and I think the individual activities like cross country. I'm more of a believer in the team aspect where you've got to look left and right. If you don't do your job, somebody else suffers. Mm-hmm. But I do think, because I was a swimmer as well, I think there's value in those individual activities. Because sometimes when it sucks and it's just you in the pavement or you in the water, you've got to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps or jock strap or whatever it is you pull yourself up by, and dig within yourself, right? And this was largely unintended when I was 14 as a freshman in high school. I was a good long distance swimmer. I mean, back in the day, to be a good high school swimmer in the 100 free, it was about 56, 57 seconds. Now that's down into the 40s for high schools or the low 50s, right?
Right.
Nutrition, genetics, or whatever it is, we've just gotten that much quicker. But I could swim a 58 second 100 10 times in a row for 1,000.
Right.
And so, but a lot of times I'd be the only guy there. I'd be like, another team wouldn't have somebody that volunteered. Well, as a freshman, I was like, I wasn't that fast to swim 100 or any other events. And how you got a varsity letter was based on points. Again,
that's right. That's right.
What the coach thought you should get. Well, the first time he thought, he gives me 15 minutes and you get like a point for every second or whatever it is. So in one meet, because nobody knew how to quantify it, because I'm like, I'll do it. I'll jump in the pool. And I swam it in just over 10 minutes. Well, now I've got enough points for a varsity letter. So what he did was give me times to make me better, right? Challenge me, right? Good coaching. challenged me, but not enough to take away my varsity letter, like to the point where it was in danger. Like he just like at the last meet, I'm just sliding in as a freshman underneath under like luau and under the window to get the letter.
Right? Yeah, right.
And years later, when I talked to him, it's like, you know, should I have had a varsity letter as a freshman? Right? I'm not advocating one way or another. And he goes, yeah, you should have, because, and this is another one of the life lessons I learned along the way. He's like, you should have, because when I was asking for somebody to help the team out and do the bad thing, do the hard thing, you raised your hand. He goes, I don't care if it's because you thought it's the only thing you could swim. He goes, everybody else took a step back and left you standing there, and you jumped in the water and did it. All right. And I look back now, and I almost feel like I wasted a lot of time there, because swimming was something I just kind of did, and I kind of did it naturally. Right. And so I was like, man, if I really busted my butt, not just to be better than those around me, but to be the best I could be, where would I have been? Right. And again,
sure.
Another life lesson I learned as a function of sports. I didn't learn it right away because I'm not that cool. Right. You know, I was like, you know, after I got kicked in the head enough times, I'm like, you know, maybe it started back there. It just didn't start last week. And I'm really a dumbass.
Well, you know, but that's the beauty of learning is it's not always immediate what the value is of what you're learning.
Right.
And it's also not always immediate how at some point in the future it might be, no guarantees, but more than likely it's going to be applicable. Like calculus, man. I don't know how many students I encounter in computer science that complain, when the hell am I ever going to use this? I don't know, but let me tell you what I do know. You can't understand that right now. Right. And that's just the truth of it. Your life is this big.
Yep.
Right? You're 19, fresh out of high school. You're a freshman, sophomore, and it's hard. Right. That's a hard subject to get through, right? Calc 1 and Calc 2. But trust me, when your life proportionally grows as you get older, you're going to understand more of how the world is all interconnected.
Right.
And at some point, you're going to be like, hey, wait a minute. This idea of limits comes in handy.
Well, that's exactly what I was just getting ready to say. Max and mins in life are really important.
Yeah, right.
And because Jared and I were talking about it a couple weeks ago, and you know, because he's doing econ, and so there's the big math component to it. And we were talking about calculus in particular, and you know, we were because he's also doing philosophy, right? And so they want him to take a logic class. And it was like, people that have had Calc 1 and 2 should be exempt from taking logic, because you've taken enough math that it's going to make you think in a logical order, right? Take ethics, contemplate stuff. But when it comes to logic, like to me, it's not an abstract thing.
No,
that's from somebody that also took a whole bunch of math, right? So it's easy. Like I've got this hammer over here, and that's the nail over there, right? And so, but to me, it's the logic piece in becoming a person of order, right, is a lot of what logic is about. And they want you to combine it with ethics so that you're not so orderful that you forget about the rest of humanity, right? Well, look at math. I mean, math people, like I'll say that if anybody in the audience is watching, they're a chief marketing officer and you're a marketing major, I'm sorry, I'm going to offend you. I would never hire a CMO that was a marketing major. Right? Because where's the imagination in that?
Right.
I want somebody who has imagination, who can think through systems, but because there's a lot of process that's involved in not only the external marketing, but the internal piece of getting leads to people and things like that. But I want you to have a base knowledge of what it is that you're selling, right? And what we're making and why that's important, why the world needs to change or is changing because of what we have. And I want you to be process oriented.
Yep.
Right. And I think it's easier if you're passionate about something, especially because in the tech world, if you're passionate about it, means you've got a better than passing understanding of it, which means you can go out and evangelize it. You can make broad, grand statements because you're in on the bigger picture.
Yeah. Right.
Right. And I think we start putting people into little boxes. I mean, you look at Jack Welch. He was the CEO of General Electric. He made that company probably one of the greatest companies of the 20th century. He was a chemical engineer. Wasn't a business guy. He was a process guy. He's a PhD in chemical engineering. He wasn't grew up, Irish kid from Boston, right? I mean, he's a PhD in chemical engineering. and was a process guy and understood people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Amongst it all, he understood people. And, my dad worked for him at General Electric, or worked, at the company at the time he was there. And would speak with reverence about the way that he dealt with people. Right.
Yeah.
But it was through a process. Right. And I think that when you get there, it's like, hey, you can have imagination, you can have everything, but if you lack the discipline, a dream without, imagination without a process is just a dream, and dreams, you got to work at them. Right. And I think
we all have dreams every night. I mean, they're like ideas. They really don't mean that much.
Right. I was flipping around YouTube the other day, and there's a country singer. I can't remember his name, but he's written his big song is a song called "I'll Be." And there was like some stages, he's standing up and there's a live audience, and it almost seemed to me like it was some industry event where they've got the artist get up there and there's a small group of media or whatever. And, that concept of having a notebook next to your bed, right? Or being able to take notes, right? And I love the story. I'll find the clip and we can kind of get it up on Twitter. But he was out at a bar one night, and he was like, because he starts off with people like, because everybody wants him to sing this one song. And they're like, the question is, well, does it bother you that people want you to sing the same song over and over again? He's like, it always struck him as odd. He goes, because it would be like having a winning lottery ticket and you hang it in your big, huge mansion and you go walk by it and go, stupid lottery ticket. It was unfathomable to him. He goes, yeah, he was struggling. He was just sitting in a bar one night and he goes, there was some drunk dude hitting on a chick. And he was just rooting for him after a while, right? Because he wasn't going well. He was just rooting for him. And the girl was complaining about something. And he's like, oh, baby, I'll be your crying shoulder. And he's like to the waiters, like, Chet, I need a notebook, napkin, a pen, please, something. I got to write it down, right?
Yeah, yeah.
When you talk about dreams, how do we change those dreams to reality, right? And I think it starts with you've got to, pen to paper, thumb to notes, however you want to do it. But you've got to start with saying, hey, I'm going to draw a line in the sand. And the line in the sand is saying, now it's written down. Right.
Right.
Here's the big goal. Right. And then, like you said, you've got to have dreams. Like, if your life is bigger than you ever imagined it, you got to stop and start imagining again.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And, I like it because I'm big. It's like, what do you want to do? I want to change the world. Right? Because you're not defining it as one thing. You're saying, hey, I'm on a journey, and I believe that something's going to come up and present itself to me that I'm going to say, look, I can positively affect the world. And the world doesn't have to be all 6.5 billion people. It can be 10 people. It can be 20 people. But how am I going to make a net positive effect on what's happening in the planet?
Right.
And it all starts with writing it down.
Well, and the thing is there's a huge power in the aggregation of it.
Yeah.
Nothing I personally do is really going to affect 6.5 billion people for the next 6 billion years. It's just the world doesn't work that way.
Actually,
but
I'm going to disagree with you on that, because one of your students along the way is going to do something that's going to affect a mass of people.
Yeah, well, and that's where I was going to go with it. Here we agree, right? It's not about me as an individual doing one thing that produces that effect. It's about all of us just doing one thing that's in the right direction that accretes that power that solves big issues. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's what I think. That's the power of education, right? And I don't, whether it's in a classroom setting like you are, or work, taking your time. Like my father, I look back now, it's like, I have, kind of not a rocky road, but I love sports. My dad hated sports. So it was very hard for us to find a middle ground in anything to do.
Sure.
But he would take time and he would find that one person that, was struggling, however, at work, right? Not usually it was stuff that was out of work and they were trying to go to the next level, didn't have a skill or whatever. And my dad recognized, hey, they were potentially a good coder because of however he defined it. And he would take time out of his day to get them on their way and to monitor that and help them and grow that. And it's like, there's this network of folks that, worked for my dad over the years that were so eternally grateful, right? Because it wasn't a big thing. It was like, here's a tool, right? It's that concept of, I think back in 2000, right after 9/11, we started that one child, one computer, and there was a little white computer with the green rabbit ears on there. They passed them out all over sub-Saharan Africa. And then we wondered why 2 years later they were all in the hands of Al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because when you don't have shoes and food, a computer that needs the internet is probably not where you're at. Maslow was right.
Yeah.
Right?
That's fucked up. I was just thinking about that exact thing yesterday.
I know, but that's
100%.
But then on the other side of the coin, you go, who killed it in that arena? And sub-Saharan Africa it's amazingly appalling to me for a lot of reasons. Number one, the amount of money that is poured into there internationally over the years for almost zero result.
Yeah, it's a giant money pit.
Right? But the CEO of Zappos, right? Somebody, and it's non-sexy, right? It's what's the number one way disease gets pushed around the continent? It's foodborne. So he's like, well, why don't we just give everybody shoes? And so Zappos has a very aggressive plan of how they're going to get shoes. Bombas, the sock company, is another one. The number one requested item by homeless people, and it's, if your feet are bad, the rest of you is on the way to being bad.
Sure.
Is they donate for every pair of socks. They started this a long time ago. It was their goal. They wanted to sell 1 million pair of socks so they could donate 1 million pair of socks.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And they thought it was going to take them 5 years. It took them 1.5 years because they sell them online and they're aggressive commercial. I'm in my car all the time driving back and forth to places that I hear a lot of those commercials. You're like, man, I got to go check this out. Right. Because if nothing else, they're doing the right thing. I don't have to cure cancer. Right. Because we're not out. We don't, in particular, we're not out to cure cancer. We're out to make it chronic. So where there's a pill you can take, we can keep you alive and we can make some money off it. But when you talk about basic things like that, don't get extravagant.
No.
Like my personal thing, and I've heard this before, and I think it like rang a bell with me. You want to fix all the problems in sub-Saharan Africa. Get one of these guys that has billions of dollars and feels badly that he's got all this money that he made probably from a tech company, right? Put $10 billion into infrastructure. The big problem with Africa is the ports of entry on east and west sides of the country. You can't get into the center of the country because there's no roads. That and graft, right? If you fix the transportation problem, you can start to chip away at the graft and everything else, right? But the basic thing is what's the least sexy thing on the planet? Building a road.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's a problem.
Or building sewer systems, right?
Right.
Well,
I'll end with this because I got to get ready. We have an open house today.
Another one?
No, I actually love these things, man. Put me in front of a group of students that need a pickup major.
Well, no, I don't mean it's a bad thing. I think that's great. I mean, because most of the time, I just saw the principal of the school for the first time live in Technicolor last night. I thought she was in the witness protection program. Right?
No, right. And so it cost me like 2 hours out of a Saturday afternoon once a month.
No,
I enjoy it. Right? But anyway, like this is what I think about it, because it's exactly what I was trying to get at. It's small little things that are done repeatedly over long periods of time by massive amounts of people. That's how you get change, right? And so like one of the things I think about is like this. Like it's easy for me to sit here and think, well, I'll build this technology to solve all these problems. Yeah, but 40% of our country, let alone the world, can't read and write. So what, like you said, what's the point of giving them a laptop? They can't use it because they can't read and write, right?
Right, yeah. Let's work on the literacy problem.
Right. At least 3 people every day in northern India get eaten by a tiger. 3 people a fucking day.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's your life.
Get them kids some track shoes. Yeah.
They ain't worried about laptops, bro.
No.
You know what I mean?
No. Yeah. It's like what's an old Chris Rock joke? He's like, like the tiger at the zoo went crazy and killed her. They're like, the tiger went crazy. No, the tiger went tiger.
Yeah.
Understand your environment. And I'll tell you a quick story. So I had a buddy of mine, was a SEAL, got out, went to college, got his commission, came back in. At the time in the late 70s, early 80s, there was no room for him in the SEAL community as a young officer. So the Navy's like, well, do you want to go fly airplanes? So he ended up flying F-14s. Right? Which how cool is that? Being a SEAL and then flying F-14s. Well, he hated flying. Hated it. Basically went in, threw his wings on the desk and said, I want to go back to the SEAL community. Well, he wanted to go to the East Coast, but they didn't have any rooms. So I'll take anything. He ends up out in San Diego. First weekend he's there because it's how we take care of you. We put you on duty on the quarterdeck. He doesn't even know who anybody is or anything, but it's the easiest job on the planet. You answer the phones, and if some disaster happens, there's a book. and you run through the plan, right?
Yeah, there's a process.
Right. Well, one of his big complaints when he was out in the fleet in the real Navy was, and this is back in the early 80s when it's not the Navy we have today. It's not the military we have today. It's not the professionalized force we have today. And, you know, a lot of junior enlisted folks lived on the base. And so public housing was not, or the base housing wasn't what it should be. Right. And so he would spend a lot of times, he goes, I almost got out of the Navy when they made him the family services officer. Some young kid would go home and dinner wasn't made and he'd smack his wife around or all that stuff. Right. And so it was really discouraging to him from like just in his heart, right? That's where it was. He gets back to the SEAL community, and on a Saturday afternoon, he gets a call from the San Diego police. He's like, hey, do you own Petty Officer so-and-so and so-and-so? He's like, I don't know, let me look, because he doesn't know anybody at the command yet. He goes and looks on a list. He's like, yeah, and he's talking to the police. And they're like, well, they're their precinct, blah, blah, blah. It's at this address. Can you send somebody to come down and get him? I goes, yeah, I'll be down to get him. And right before he hangs up the phone, he goes, what were they doing? He goes, why did you arrest him, right? Because it didn't occur to him to ask. He was more concerned about figuring out, did SEAL Team 1 own him? And what are the logistics to go pick him up, right? He goes, well, we caught him drunk at the San Diego Zoo riding the zebras. At the San Diego Zoo, where possible, they use psychological barriers.
That's right. Yeah, it's beautiful down there.
And so the police officer's like, apparently those psychological barriers only work one way. But when you go to the San Diego Zoo, guess who's in a effing cage? The big ass gorillas and the tigers.
Yeah.
Right? Because their psychology is, hey, look, lunch, right? But yeah, that's right. He got his car, and he tells his story today. And he's like, that's when I go, he goes, I'm back. He goes, because at least when team guys do stupid crap, it's not smacking up their eyes. They're riding the zebras drunk in the zoo.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's probably because they couldn't get into like the great ape or the tiger cage.
Right. Where they getting eaten. Right.
Yeah.
You know, in other news, you know, there's a guy down at the San Diego, Ron Burgundy's down at the San Diego Zoo talking about the kid that just got eaten. Right. No, we're going to get in and ride a zebra. Right.
Yeah.
But that's, you know, you hit the nail on the head. Right. We focus on, we don't, here's the top whatever group, and we focus at the bottom of the group that's on their way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure it does.
I think public education does two things unbelievably. They do gifted programs and they do special needs.
Yep.
If you're in that 85% in the middle, good luck.
You're on your own.
Right. You know, you don't have parents that are driving you and stuff like that. I mean, you look at, I'm amazed when these stories of these really underprivileged kids, especially in big cities like New York City, where they get into an academy that's way out of their way on the other side of town. And every day they take public transportation to and from it. Sometimes it takes an hour and a half to get to school. And they're studying, they're dedicated. Mm-hmm. Those are the achievers. Those are the people that are changing the world. Why? Because at 10, they realize the importance of being on public transportation to go get what they want.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, and they figured it out. They did something that was hard.
You know, one of the reasons that, frankly, why our kids went to Catholic is because of the rigorous academics, right? Yeah. And you're in a group where everybody else is experiencing the same thing. Like, you can't complain, right? Because everybody's got the same homework every night. Everybody's got the same rigor that's applied to the problem. We can agree or disagree whether all of it is warranted or necessary, but, you know, it's directionally correct, is to use the term that you talk.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's producing results. I mean,
right. You have kids that none of my public school friends have homework. Well, let's talk about what it's going to be like when they go to college, right? When you're on your own, right? I mean, my job as a parent is to get my child or children to the point where when they walk away, all my son's friends after freshman year showed up at the house and they were like, we've got, Mr. Eberly, college is easy. Well, do you think it's easy, or do you think that you were prepared? Right?
Yes,
you got two major things. I've got to prepare. When I go to college, I've got to learn how to be a functioning member of that tribe and be on my own and do laundry and be an adult and be a thing. And I've also got to learn how to be a student.
Right.
And how to be disciplined and parse my time. Most kids don't fail because they're too dumb, but most kids fail college because they don't have the discipline to do that.
Yeah.
Right? And they can't imagine how to get there. Well, if I've got to learn how to cite my work in a paper, if I've got to learn how to MLE format to write an English paper, if I've got to learn how to do research, now I've also got to learn how to learn. Right? And my whole goal was to get it to where my kids didn't have to learn how to learn. And so all these young men at the time, they were my son's friends coming home. They're like, it's easy. I said, come back junior, senior year and tell me how easy it is. But it's still easy because they understand the building blocks. They understand the blocking and tackling and learning.
That's right.
Yeah. I think that's the gift.
Well, you solve those easy learning curves early, and you leave the hard shit for when it's going to be hard.
Right. My dad, one of the best things he ever said, and it was about life. He said, look, if you don't know how to behave and you don't know right from wrong by the time the word teen is used in your age, you're on a bad glide slope. Yep. It doesn't mean you're not going to be stupid when you're a teenager, but he goes, at least you can contemplate right and wrong while you're sitting there waiting for me to come get you.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, you solve
more than once. He was correct.
Yeah, you solve the easy problems when they're easy. Don't let them get hard, and you leave the hard stuff for when it's hard.
Right, but then you're equipped to deal with the hard stuff because you're not worried about, you're able to focus just on that because I'm not worried about how to cite a science paper.
Right. Like I would bet, I'll finish with this note to tie this all together, right? I would bet at least 2 out of the 3 northern Indians that get eaten by a tiger every day wouldn't get eaten by a tiger if they didn't have to go out and find their own food. Right? So they're so busy trying to solve that very basic need of I'm hungry, I need to find food.
Right.
That they're willing to take that risk of getting eaten by a fucking tiger, dude. Could you imagine?
Oh, I know.
What?
Well, Afghanistan is the same way. You'd drive out, you'd go to some place and it was like, this is where you decided to put your hut up?
Yeah, right.
Where's the water? Where's there? And it's imagination, right? They're in their world. Most people don't contemplate. They never go more than 5 miles away from their home. They wouldn't contemplate that, right? It's not in their lexicon of things to do. Right. Because it's where they're at. Right. And we have, to not to drag this on, but you go out by 29 Palms, like in California, like east of LA, and then out north going towards the Chocolate Mountains in the desert. Like you're driving from 29 Palms, a military base out there, to LA or San Diego, and you'll be out in the middle of nowhere, and all of a sudden, boom, there's a house.
Yeah, and you're like, why is this here? What do these people do?
I mean, there's some houses in Virginia Beach where I'm like, okay, that person obviously got left some property in a will or something like that. And I'm like, good for you, build a house on it, right? But just, I get the Homestead Act, right? But kind of made the farming giant we are, right? But literally, like it's a dirt farm.
Yeah.
Like there's no way to grow crops there. There's no way to do anything. It's just literally like you move to the Dust Bowl.
Yeah. My wife and I used to have that conversation all the time, driving like down to Palm Springs or out to Vegas. Like there's just these little couple houses out in the middle of nowhere. And this is pure desert, scrubland. And you're like, I don't understand.
Like when you're driving to Vegas, what is it, Kingman? And you can actually you do that big thing and then you get out and you go back down into the desert floor. Actually, if you go not towards Vegas, but you're going towards Flagstaff.
Yes, towards Flagstaff.
Between there and Flagstaff, there's one gas station. Right? I remember driving. This was in 1987. I'm driving with another guy. We're coming across country to come to the East Coast to work. And we're like, oh man, we're thirsty. It's like the windows are open. It's 1,000,000 degrees. We can see the tall trees in Flagstaff, and we're just waiting to get up and cool off.
Yeah.
Pull over. I walk in. There's a thermostat in there. It says 115. There's a lady in a sweatshirt in there. There's one Gatorade and one ice cream, and we got to fight over who's having which one.
Yeah.
And it's just that when you segregate people from humanity that wildly, that's when you show up and you're just like, okay, I got dropped into a movie somewhere. There's going to be a camera here. There's going to be something that's going to cause me to be on a television episode too, because it's 100+ degrees and there's a lady in a sweatshirt there sitting like this.
Right.
Like, did you just walk out of hell?
Yeah.
Where seems warm, cool.
See, and that's when my spidey sense kick in.
Oh yeah.
I tell myself, whatever you do not be here when the sun goes down.
Get back to back with whoever you're with, and get in your car and drive as fast as you can.
That's right.
But all right, my friend, have a great day at your thing and change some young minds, inspire some people today.
Thank you, brother. Have a great weekend. Always a pleasure to talk to you. I'll let you know. We should be able to do this next week with Dana. I'll see where he's at.
Cool. I'll reach out to him as well. See what he's got going on.
Cool.
All right, man.
Have a good weekend, everybody. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.